Hello, my name is Kira O'Reilly and I'm an artist. I work in a number of different media, from performance art to sculpture and writing, but I also have worked over the years with different kinds of living materials and systems and ideas around bodies, all kinds of bodies, from human bodies to bodies of other species, and our relationships, our ecologies perhaps is another word to think about, the kind of systems and interactions and metabolisms that we participate in. This is a workshop on creating Winogradsky columns. So a Winogradsky column is a closed system, often made using some kind of glass container, not necessarily as large as this, but this is going to be one of the containers that we use. Quite often they're some kind of glass jar, maybe something tall and narrow. And a Winogradsky column is a closed system made of mud and water from a particular location, with the addition of nutrients, and these nutrients allow the indigenous microorganisms in the mud and water to feed and metabolize. And over weeks and months, the Winogradsky column goes from looking like complete mud and something that's very oblique and not necessarily very interesting, to a dynamic system of the different communities of microorganisms as they organize themselves according to how they metabolize. So we might end up with microorganisms that really enjoy and use oxygen at the top where they can access oxygen, and then the layers underneath will be anaerobic bacteria. So these are the different steps for making a Winogradsky column. This is a version of it. I think there are probably other versions, but the main principles are, first, we go to a water source. So we're going to go to a natural water source, a pond. And we're going to use these buckets to collect some mud. This is why we have the shovel for the mud. But we're also going to collect some water from the pond. So we have water from the pond and mud from the pond. So this is our environment. They're from the same location. They're from the same location because we want to cultivate the microorganisms from a specific place. So we could perhaps think of this like a portrait of a location. So step one is get some mud and water. We're going to bring the mud and water back here to our workshop venue. And then each person is going to get a bowl and they're going to create a paste. They're going to add some water, some of the ambient water, to the mud to create a paste. To that paste, they're going to add different materials that they think will be good nutrients or will contain nutrients for the different kinds of bacteria. So we have some carbon-based nutrients, like some oats and some leaves. And one of the things that we might do when we're collecting water and mud is collect some nearby grasses and some nearby leaves and so on. We also have things like calcium carbonate, which will crush in the mortar and pestle. So that's another nutrient. We also have eggs. And we're going to use two of the elements of the eggs. We have the shells, which also have calcium carbonate, but we also have a sulfur material contained in the yolk. So we'll separate the eggs, we will get rid of the whites, and we will use the yolks and the shells. And then we can also add some other things, like we have some plant food. We might want to look and see what's inside that, but that might be interesting to add. We have some vitamin tablets. We could also do something like collect bits of rust from around the building. Again, environmental materials that might be around, that might be opportunist materials. So our step 2 is really to do with mixing. We'll also use some bits of paper or newspaper. We might even include from Nature an old science article that we think the bacteria might particularly like to digest. But again, this is a carbon-based material. So that's our second step. So we do all of the mixing. Then the third step is decanting. So for our columns to thrive, we need containers. So we will decant into containers. This is an exceptionally big and beautiful container. We're going to do a massive one. So this step is to decant, but often we might want to use a smaller container. So we have this one. You could use something like this. You can even use a plastic bottle. What's important is for it to be see-through so that you can, over the hopefully months and years of enjoying your Winogradsky column, you can see what's happening. I think that was step 3. And then step 4 is to make that into a closed system. So for the first couple of weeks, you do want to put a lid on your Winogradsky column, but you do want to be able to let it burp a little bit. The bacteria, as they move around and ferment and sort themselves out, will be emitting various gases. It can be really smelly. It can be unpleasant. It can smell like drains. So you want to be able to burp it, just lift up the lid and let a little bit out. But after a couple of weeks, it will settle, and then you want to seal it. You want to close it off so it becomes a closed system. And there are different ways. Some containers have lids, others don't, so we'll make that work. Part of the fun of this will be just figuring out how to make that fit. And then your final stage is to put it somewhere. You can experiment. You might want to make one that you put in the light. You might want to make one exactly the same that you put in the dark. You might want to partially cover your Winogradsky column. But you put it somewhere where you're interested in how it's going to respond to the environment. This is something you can change. You can keep it in the dark, then you can put it in the light, and you can observe. Winogradsky columns involve extensive patience. So for the first few weeks for sure, but maybe even months, it might just look like a dark, gloomy, muddy miasma of nothing. You might see it separate itself out where the mud area sinks and you have a big band of, increasingly big band of water. And then this all might be the same kind of color. But over time, you'll begin to see different graduations of color. You might find yourself surprised to see there might be a splotch of purple or a line of green or something rusty or something very, very dark. But these different subtle colorations will start to form. And those will change over the years depending on the weather, heat, where you position it. And those are also elements that you can experiment with. So maybe one way to think about a Winogradsky column when you're creating one and when you're doing a workshop to create one is that this is potentially a long-term situation and that your final stage or your final step is as long as you want it to be. I've currently got 2 that have been living with me since I think 2016, something like that. So, and they're looking gorgeous and they change throughout the year.